Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to another flipping guide, and in this guide, we're going to be showing you how to flip high margin items safely, effectively, and as quickly as possible to make you some huge bank. I also have one really useful tip that's going to allow you to know if you've got an accurate price listing for your item without actually having to do a margin check, which is really great. There's going to be a lot of good information in this one, so I hope you find it useful. Leave a like if you do, and let's get into this high margin flipping guide. If you're new to flipping expensive items, I recommend that you stick to what I call the big three, and the big three are the Elysian Spirit Shield, the Scythe of Vitter, and the Twisted Bow. And these are all high margin items that have designated endgame PVM uses, and they're going to be less subject to larger price swings as they have slightly higher volume than some of their counterparts. Start with these if you have no high margin flipping experience. Step 1 of high margin flipping is finding the margin. Now, since these items have such a big margin, and margins can fluctuate greatly at times, you do not want to perform a manual margin check on these items. Instead, to hunt the margin, we're going to use a combination of GE Tracker and the official RuneScape Grand Exchange website to find the actual margin. Our first step to finding the margin is to use GE Tracker to take an educated guess at where the margin actually is. So currently we can see the Twisted Bow on GE Tracker here is trading for about 1,137,902,000. I always think it's better to take a more conservative guess at where the margin is, so I'll probably list around 1,137,205,000, going about 700k underneath the current sell price for this item. And it's always good to check the GE Tracker graph as well, especially if you have GE Tracker Premium, as it'll let you see kind of which way the item is trending, and currently we can see it is in a downward direction, so we're going to play it safe and put a relatively low listing in there, and then use the next step to actually track if this margin is accurate. Okay, we are over on the Grand Exchange now, and as mentioned in the previous clip, we're going to go ahead and list the Twisted Bow here for 1,137,245,995 GP each. We're only going to list one for now, of course, but we're, again, playing it pretty conservative with our price guess, and we're going to use this next step to actually follow if this price listing is accurate. So now we are over on the official RuneScape website to track this Twisted Bow trade, and as you'll notice, the official RuneScape Grand Exchange tracker does not really have accurate price listings, but the important thing that it does have is accurate volume listings, and these things get reset constantly. I think every 5 minutes it's going to let us know if a trade has been executed. So you can see that today, October 15th, only 9 of these have been traded so far, and we just put our listing in as well, right? So if we let this sit for another 5 minutes and we check the volume again by reloading this page, and our Twisted Bow has not bought, then we know that our price listing is too low and our margin is too low, and that we actually need to increase our price listing to find the actual margin. So this process can actually take some time, guys. I don't expect you to get it right off the bat. Sometimes a lot of this flipping session is actually going to be hunting the margin behind this item. And once we find that margin, of course, we can hit it repeatedly, but finding the margin without paying for a margin check is half the battle. It's been about 11 minutes, and as you can see on the official RuneScape website, that the volume moved from 9 to 21, so currently there are Twisted Bow trades going on, but we are just not on the correct margin, which tells us that we actually have to move our price listing up a little bit here. When you do another price listing here, I recommend, if your item did not buy on the first attempt, that you bump it up by maybe about 400 to 500k. So we're going to list at 645 this time instead of, what were we at before, 245? So we'll give it a nice 400k increase, and we're going to let that sit for another 10 minutes or so. Alright, we finally bought the Twisted Bow following the same process as we did before. We did another slight price increase, but we did end up getting one. and now we're going to turn around and sell it. So I recommend, again, you use GE Tracker for your margin estimate, but we're just going to be listing possibly a little bit higher than the GE Tracker listing, and then following the same process as before when we tracked the buy on the official RuneScape website. We're going to do the same thing to track our sale, and we're going to see if this thing actually does end up trading or not. A few quick tips in the meantime. I'm currently trying to trade these high margin items during prime time or during a more popular part of the game when a lot of players are online and making trades. So generally when you are flipping during a peak time, you're going to have smaller margins but quicker trades. So I know for a Twisted Bow, I'm going to get about 700 to 800k margins on them during a peak time, but off peak you can get like 1 mil to 1.5 mil margins on them, which is obviously a lot better, even bigger than that sometimes, 3 mil occasionally. So I'm just going to play it very safe, try to get this Twisted Bow bought and sold pretty quickly. Another tip is you generally want to try to sell the item a little bit quicker than you bought it. And the reason that is because you want to sell that item so you know where the margin is actively trading at. As you spent so much time trying to hunt that margin, you do want to, of course, sell for a good margin always, but at the same time, just keep in mind that the longer you try and sell this thing, the more likely the buy price is to move as well. So just keep that in mind. So we ended up getting that Twisted Bow sold off here, but the margin was a lot smaller than we would have liked, only 475k on that Twisted Bow. So that tells me, since we had to shift the sell price down a couple of times, the margin, the buy price at least, is probably a lot lower than we actually bought for. So I'm going to knock down this margin by about, I don't know, 200k or so, and try to pick up a nice cheap Twisted Bow and then sell it back. Typically, when I'm flipping these high margin items during prime time, I'm actually looking to get about a 700 to 800k margin on them. So if I'm getting less than that, then I know either one, the item is not worth flipping, or two, my margin is too small compared to what the actual margin is. So we're going to go back and list another Twisted Bow and try that again. And look at that, we actually got the price listing right. We bumped the margin down by about 200k and we were able to buy a Twisted Bow. Now we're going to use the same sale price as before because we want to stay on top of that margin. We're kind of moving into the second phase of flipping these high margin items, and that actually means making the money, flipping the margin and staying as active as possible on the margin to actually hit this price listing. Now, again, you're going to want to, every time you go to resell one of these high margin items, you want to knock the margin down just by a little bit, just in case someone is actually competing with you. So we're going to go 5k underneath the previous sale price, and we're going to let that do its thing. And another one has sold. We're going to keep riding this margin as much as we can, but that second Twisted Bow actually was a lot better profit-wise. We're looking at about 620k in margins now, so that's really, really good. I'm actually going to try to list this next Twisted Bow even lower than the previous one, as I've noticed it's taken quite a while to sell some of these Twisted Bows here, so we're actually going to list a little bit lower on this next one. I'm not going to wait too long to see if this lower price listing is going to buy, but again, I'm trying to optimize the margin as much as possible, and if I think an item might be trending in a downward direction, then I'm going to put a lower buy listing in to try to capitalize on top of it. During peak times during the game, if you're waiting more than 10 minutes for a flip to complete, so the buy and the sale offer in total, if you're waiting more than 10 minutes, then it probably means you're not listing right on margin. And that's not always a bad thing because sometimes the price will fluctuate and your offer will actually fill. But if you are waiting that amount of time, you're likely not right on the margin, so you might want to adjust your prices. But of course, use the official RuneScape website to confirm that. That is the absolute best way to see if your price listings are accurate or not. Alright everyone, we just finished our T-bow flipping session. We were able to flip 8 Twisted Bows for a profit of 5.1 mil in the end, which was actually a pretty good session, especially with the last 3 or 4 flips. They went really well. But let me walk through each margin here and kind of what was going on. So we were able to trade the Twisted Bow a couple times underneath the 1,138,000,000 price point. We actually got 2 of those bought and sold underneath that price. But then I saw a pretty big jump in the margin. Looks like the Twisted Bow went up in price, and then they started buying at 1,138,315,000. So once that started happening, I started taking advantage of that increased margin, and since the margin shifted upwards, I think I was probably one of the only flippers who did notice that upward shift, and I was able to take advantage of it. Now, as you can see, I did try to sell the next Twisted Bow back for 1,138,890,000, and with each sell offer, you can see I slightly increased the price that I was selling it for. Eventually, we broke the 1,139,000,000 price point, and we kept selling above that. Once I did notice that we were well above that price point and the item was trading back and forth, I decided to not stretch the margin any further and try to get greedy. I just secured that margin and kept flipping it for that margin until the end of my session. Of course, similar principles would work for the Elysian Spirit Shield or the Scythe of Vitur, but in this video, we just decided to use the Twisted Bow as an example. I hope this guide helped you guys out, and I hope you use some of these tips, especially the official Grand Exchange website, to actually start completing these high margin flips. You can make a lot of money on these flips, and just in this session alone, while creating this guide, we were able to profit 5.1 mil in just over an hour, about an hour and 5 minutes or so. So it really did not take a lot of time to make this 5 mil and make the guide at the same time. Again, I hope you guys did enjoy it. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more flipping and money making videos, and of course I will see you guys next time.